Guys and girls. So today we're looking at chapter 16, section 1 of your text. You can take notes on a separate piece of binder paper or on a Google Doc and then get those turned into Google Classroom. If you're doing the online module, I'm not sure what module number it is on HMH Co, but you can go ahead and just line up or match up the names. Before we get started, a quick review of some of the big ideas from the last section. I know it's been a while since you read it. Isolationism. The United States, like in World War I, attempts to isolate themselves from another global conflict. They don't want to get dragged into another war, so they have this policy of isolationism, which essentially is just like, we're not going to get involved as much as possible, right? Germany begins to expand its Third Reich. Third Reich is another more official name for their empire, right? This is specifically the empire created under the Nazi regime and Hitler. So we've talked about how Germany takes Austria and Czechoslovakia. There's a big population of German people in both Austria and Czechoslovakia. Austria doesn't really put up a fight. Hitler kind of bullies Austrian leadership into handing over power. The Czechoslovakians do attempt to kind of put up more of a fight. Remember, Hitler wants that area of Czechoslovakia known as the Sudetenland. It's got about 3 million German speaking people that live in that region. It's also heavily fortified. And this idea of Anschluss that was raised by pro-Nazi feelings, this idea that German people should be unified, right, is kind of the driving force there. In 1938, Hitler demands the Sudetenland to be given to Germany. The Czech Republic refuses. France and Britain were actually preparing for war when Mussolini proposed meeting in Germany. This meeting was known as a Munich Conference, and it was held in order to kind of try to hammer out a deal before France and Britain went ahead and declared war. The British Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, believed that he could preserve peace if he just gave in to Hitler's demands. And so, in another example of appeasement, of trying to please this aggressor, Hitler, to prevent war, is happening here in the Munich Conference. Neville Chamberlain gives in to Hitler's demand. He decides, okay, let's just give him the Sudetenland, and if he promises to back off after that. And so that's what happens at the Munich Conference. Czechoslovakia obviously is not invited, even though this is regarding their land, their territory. Stalin also was not invited, even though he has nothing to do with this. He has some interest there, territorial interest, and he later kind of resents not being invited to this. But either way, in the Munich Conference, Neville Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, believes that, well, if we just give in to his demands, he will, he'll stop and he'll leave us alone. And that's obviously not the case. Almost immediately, Hitler goes ahead and invades the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia, and then Mussolini goes and invades a nearby country of Albania. And the only other thing from that section was a Non-Aggression Pact. So Great Britain and France are kind of like trying to work out this deal with Stalin and Russia so that, if Hitler does continue to invade other countries, they can team up. But at the same time, Stalin is secretly meeting with Hitler, and he is coming up with his own agreement with Hitler. That is known as a Non-Aggression Pact. So even though Stalin was meeting with Great Britain and France to kind of plot against Hitler, he at the same time is secretly meeting with Hitler, and he signs this non-aggression pact with him for like 10 years. And this non-aggression pact essentially just says, if you don't attack me, I won't attack you. And it also had some other provisions we'll talk about in a second. So let's go ahead and get into this section. So setting the stage, after Hitler moves into the Rhineland, Austria, and Czechoslovakia, he turns his eyes to Poland. So each time the Nazi dictator grabs new territory, he's going to declare an end to his demands. Peace seems to be guaranteed to other European nations until Hitler then makes another move. So it becomes more and more clear that Hitler's goal is to expand his empire. So here we go, the Non-Aggression Pact. Quick review is a 10-year agreement in which Hitler promised Stalin territory, but in secret, they're actually planning on how to divide up Poland between them. Hitler is also going to promise Stalin that he can take over Finland, the Baltic countries of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Remember, these are countries that were taken from Russia after World War I, or created after World War I. Yeah, so that's the Non-Aggression Pact. So let's talk about Germany's strategy for this war. And from World War I, it's actually kind of similar, but there's one key distinguishing characteristic of Germany's approach. It's called Blitzkrieg, and it means lightning war. And what Blitzkrieg is, it essentially was the tactic or the policy of using fast-moving airplanes, tanks, and then followed that by massive infantry forces to take enemy defenders by surprise and then quickly overwhelm them. So remember that technology is relatively new. They're going to use this new technology in a new way, and it really is going to catch their enemies by surprise. In 1939, September of 1939, the Germans for the first time used this tactic of Blitzkrieg to attack Warsaw, the capital of Poland. Here we have an image of war-torn Warsaw. These are Nazi tanks tearing down the city. This is a Polish survivor. So, of course, immediately after, Germany again, goes back on their word to leave these countries alone and goes ahead and invades Poland. France and Great Britain declare war on Germany. But it's going to take them some time to mobilize, right, to get their armies up and going. So the western half of Poland is going to fall to Hitler. At the same time, Stalin is making his move. The Soviets are moving into the eastern part of Poland. So Stalin sends his troops in there. They take the eastern part of Poland. They also take Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, just as Hitler had promised under the Non-Aggression Pact. Finland, this Scandinavian country to the north, they actually put up a pretty good resistance. They had some interesting stories there. Finnish people or soldiers actually were trained to fight on skis, and so you see them kind of engaging in warfare on skis for like the first time ever. But unfortunately, they're just not equipped well enough to fight off the Soviets. So Russia under Stalin ends up winning, and the Finnish have to accept Stalin's surrender terms. So we have an image of Finnish soldiers on skis. All right, so the Phoney War. So what happens is in this period between when France and Great Britain declare war on Germany, and they go to mobilize. They station themselves on the Maginot Line. It's a system of fortifications along the France's border with Germany. It's this area kind of in here, in darker red. And what happens? Well, the Brits and the French mobilize to this area here, and then they just kind of sit and wait for the Germans' attack. And nothing happens because the Germans are kind of sitting and waiting for the Great Britons to attack and the French to attack as well. And so this time where they're just kind of sitting around waiting becomes known as the Phoney War. But the calm will end. Hitler eventually goes ahead and launches a surprise invasion of Denmark and Norway. He attacks up north, up here. And Denmark and Norway both have to surrender to Hitler. And then Germany begins to build a base along the coast to launch a strike on Great Britain. So they begin to build bases up here. I think I have a better map than that. Okay, so this is some soldiers during the Phoney War. Okay, so France eventually falls. So next, Hitler is going to invade France. So he sends his tanks through the Ardennes. It's a heavily wooded area in northern France. In Luxembourg and Belgium. He kind of has to cut through there. They squeeze through the Maginot Line and they move across France. So they find this area that's not really fortified. They're able to squeeze through there to get into France. I'll show you a map in a second. So what happens is once they squeeze through this line and they swing kind of up north a little bit, and they end up trapping the Allied forces around the northern French of Lille. The Allies have to retreat to the beaches of Dunkirk. It's a French port. And Great Britain then has to set out this huge rescue mission to rescue these stranded soldiers. So I'll show you a map of what that looks like. So we've got the Germans here moving through the Ardennes. They're squeezing through, oh, this is a line here, excuse me. They're squeezing through that Maginot Line here, and then they're swinging up north. We have Germans here as well, and so we have the British and French forces stranded here in this area of Dunkirk. So what's going to happen is you're going to have this really a very huge heroic act that's ever seen in war. And Great Britain has to set out to rescue their army. They send a fleet of about 850 ships across the English Channel to Dunkirk, along with Royal Navy ships, civilian crafts even. So people get their crafts out there. They get their yachts, their lifeboats, their motorboats, their paddle steamers, fishing boats. People like really just kind of rally together to rescue these stranded soldiers. And so what they create is kind of this amateur armada. They're under heavy fire from German bombers, but they're able to sail kind of back and forth from Britain to Dunkirk to kind of ferry all of these soldiers. And in the end, they end up saving about 340 soldiers and carry them back to safety. There's actually a movie about this if you're interested. I believe it's called Dunkirk. I don't know if any of you have seen it. So here we have some images of the stranded soldiers. All right, guys and girls, so we're going to stop here. This is part 1. I will post part 2 so that you can continue your notes. As always, please let me know if you have any questions. And yeah, thanks.